Hello and welcome everyone to Ananke's Festival of Literature. I am absolutely thrilled to welcome my honored guests, Mohammad Hanif, Sabyn Javeri, and Javeria Hasnain. So welcome everyone. Today's topic, When Swords Silences the Pen, Writing in the Age of Power, is not just uh, a theme or a topic, it is a call to action and reflection. These days, the pen is no longer mightier than the sword, or it seems that way. And truth is having a difficult, if not deadly, time speaking to power. This topic will investigate what tactics and techniques work as we write in the age of power. A little bit about our guests. Mohammad Hanif was born in Okara, Pakistan in 1965. He graduated from the Pakistan Air Force Academy and then worked as a pilot for the Air Force. After a few years in the military, he decided to change professions and embarked on a career as a journalist and writer. Hanif moved to London with his family in the late 1990s. There, he worked for the BBC, wrote articles for The Guardian and the New York Times, as well as his own literary works. Several plays and the screenplay for the film The Long Night, directed by Raat Chali Hai Jhoom Ke, were written in London. The author has completed the renowned creative writing program at the University of East Anglia in the English capital. In 2008, his debut novel, A Case of Exploding Mangoes, published in 2008, A Box of Exploding Mangoes, 2009, was published, with which Hanif abruptly became an international best-selling author. In a satirical examination of the still unsolved plane crash of August 17, 1988, in which Pakistani military dictator Mohammad Ziaul Haq, several high-ranking generals, and the US ambassador were killed, he delivers a fast-paced, witty, and at the same time, relentless analysis of patriarchal power systems with all their struggles and intrigues. Hanif, who has been living back in Pakistan since the end of 2008, where he works as a BBC correspondent in Karachi, has been celebrated by critics both for his perceptive, socially analytical eye and for his outstanding narrative qualities. He concentrates, quote unquote, he concentrates with gleeful scorn on the fine tuning of political detail and the sly irony of his dialogues. This author is virtuoso of perfidious, ambiguous inflections. In Our Lady of Alice Bhatti, Hanif humorously yet powerfully denounces a society in which misogyny, religious fanaticism, and violence are the order of the day. Set in the ramshackle, hopelessly overcrowded Sacred Heart Hospital in Karachi, an unusual love story develops between a Catholic nurse, Alice Bhatti, and Muslim police officer Teddy Butt, who works for the notoriously brutal Gentleman Corps. Mohammad Hanif has received numerous awards, including the Korean Literature Prize and the Commonwealth Writers' Prize for Best Debut, was nominated for the Man Booker Prize and the Guardian First Book Award for A Case of Exploding Mangoes and for the Wellcome Trust Book Prize and the DSC Prize for South Asian Literature for Our Lady of Alice Bhatti. In 2013, Hanif wrote a report commissioned by the Human Rights Commission of Pakistan on dissidents whose trail was lost in Balochistan. Sabyn Javeri is a senior lecturer of writing, literature, and creative writing at New York University, Abu Dhabi. She is the author of Hijabistan and the novel Nobody Killed Her, and has initiated and edited two multilingual anthologies of student writings titled The Arzu Anthology of Student Voices. Her writing has been widely anthologized and published in the South Asian Review, London Magazine, Litro, Journal of Commonwealth Literature, Vasafari, Oxonian Review, Trespass, and World Literature, among other publications, and she writes a monthly column for Three Quarks daily on gender and identity. She has a master's from the University of Oxford and a PhD from the University of Leicester. Her research interests include transcultural feminism, South Asian literature, inclusive pedagogy, and creative writing. Sabin, you've also started teaching at the Oxford University, I believe. Sabin,
Yeah, I teach at the University of Oxford's Masters in Creative Writing program.
I just wanted to mention that as well. Javeria Hasnain is a Brooklyn-based Pakistani poet, translator, and educator. Her poems and prose have appeared widely, most recently in Pelidus, and I'm sorry for the pronunciation. Javeria, if you can pronounce it for me.
Pleiades.
Poet Lore, The Brazenhead Review, and Foglifter. She is currently a Fulbright Scholar and an MFA poetry candidate at the New School and was selected as a 2023-24 Educational Associate at Teacher and Writers Collaborative. Her interests lie at the intersection of education and literary arts. She has previously worked with Cave Canem Foundation, the Adroit Journal, and Habib University in both administrative and editorial capacities, and currently serves as a manuscript reader for Tupelo Press. So welcome, everyone. So I'll quickly begin with the questions, and we'll start with Mohammad Hanif. Journalists, writers, thinkers, activists all across the world have been accused of anything from sedition, from anti-state activities to anti-Semitism through words and action. These allegations by the past that we are actually not new, and neither are the consequences, the onslaught of oppression and suppression. So if you can reflect on that and share how you have personally dealt with this.
Well, thank you for having me, Sabin. I don't really know there's like much that I can bring to this discussion in terms of my personal. I'm kind of safe. I'm sitting at home. I'm warm. But recently we've seen kind of, I've lost count now, how many journalists have been brutally killed in Gaza. So anything that I say has actually no meaning as compared to. So there have always been these tensions between powers and kind of writers. It is one of the jobs that you question power. Sometimes you poke it in the eye and run away, and sometimes you stand there and confront it. So yes, from kind of newsroom to field reporting, there are hazards. There are hazards when you're by yourself trying to write a novel or a short story, and sometimes you not only question powers that be, but you also question yourself, because you may not admit it, but you also have, because you have a pen and a paper and ways to kind of tell stories, you also have power. So you kind of question those, your own powers as well sometimes, at least you should. No, I've sort of lived in and out of Pakistan for a while. The only kind of fun thing that happened to me, there have been kind of some court cases, because when you're a journalist, like when you kind of write about somebody who's in power, they have the right to go to the court and kind of, ask you to explain yourself. So that has happened in my journalistic career. But the only fun thing that's happened is that my book came out in 2008, my first book, A Case of Exploding Mangoes, and it was, as they say, it was well received. I had no trouble. I was living there, and it was, from what I know, it was also sort of in government libraries, and was being parts of it were being taught in kind of colleges and some schools. So you think that, oh, you're completely fine and kosher, and then it came out in a translation in Urdu 10 years after its publications. And then suddenly there were raids at my publisher's office, bookshops. They took away all the copies. They did not physically harm me. I think they were kind of mild threats. But so that was my kind of my own little episode with the powers. But as I said right in the beginning, I mean, sort of, I'm fine, I'm safe, I can still write. I do have to think twice about what I write. But I think things have escalated since then. The ways to kind of, censors is to pick up somebody's book or ban somebody's book, or just bomb them en masse. So I don't even know if we can kind of talk about the two things in the same conversation.
Absolutely. Sabine, coming over to you, politics is one thing, but writing about, uh, for instance, your book Hijabistan. So did you encounter, because when you're talking about Hijabistan, one has to deal, a writer, once published, has to deal with maybe issues stemming from patriarchy, and so how was it for you, in those terms, aligned with, when talking about when swords overpower the pen, right? So how was your experience after your book Hijabistan came out?
Yeah, well, I think unlike Hanif, I'm not a journalist. I don't write columns which may or may not be politically motivated. For me, writing was purely a way of exploring craft, exploring themes, and really just telling stories which I felt not necessarily needed to be heard, but ones which I thought I could tell well. So my first novel was actually a political thriller, and it was loosely based on, just inspired very loosely by Benazir Bhutto and her relationship with her secretary. And when it was about to come out, there was a lot of, somebody got very annoyed and they said, you can't write this and you shouldn't be. But it came out, nothing happened. Commercially, it did well. And then when I wrote Hijabistan, again, there was a little bit of hoopla. Some of the newspaper reviewers wrote things like, well, this is what she should have written. This is what should have happened in the book. This was a really missed opportunity to write a really feminist narrative with, these sort of Avengers kind of women who were taking revenge on patriarchy and smashing the patriarchy. But, no one really takes a stand in this book, and it's very disappointing. So, yeah, there's a lot of that kind of criticism. There was some worrying criticism where I did get, there were some threats, but I think it was more to do with something else that was going on in my ex-husband's life at the moment, and it sort of got connected to the book. Yeah, there were things like that, but I completely agree with what Hanif just said, that there is so much going on in the world right now, that it just seems a little pointless to be comparing, at least for me, to be talking about my own experience. I do feel that there is a lot of pressure right now on writers to make a statement, to take a stand, to do what they can to support causes. But I also feel that some of it has become very performative, to the extent that the storytellers are profiting more from telling stories than the people who are actually affected. It's not really benefiting the people who are being exploited. And in that sense, I feel storytelling is becoming a little exploitative, a little performative. And that's something I think we also need to pay attention to when we talk about the power of the pen.
Absolutely, absolutely. Javeria, as a poet, how have you dealt with, such scenarios, or how do you react to such scenarios?
Thank you, Sabine. And thank you both Hanif sir and Sabine for saying this. And I do agree with a lot of what you guys said. I was in this just reminds me of this one workshop that I was a part of. This is back in summer in when I was in the US. And everything is unfolding and the genocide is unfolding, and a lot of people and poets and writers are writing about it as well. And one of our workshop mates brought a poem that takes place in a museum, and in a war museum. So they're in a museum, and these are all the bombs and the aircrafts and everything, and they're looking at them and kind of reflecting on what is happening. And so this workshop instructor of mine, Nate Marshall, who's a poet living in the US, really pointed out, like said something that will stay with me for a long time, be that like as you are criticizing the empire, you also, well, like the best poem one can write about the empire is how it's destroying you, but also how it's benefiting you, and how you are also one of the benefactors of the empire. And truly, like living there for those 2 years, I am, of course, both like paying the tax money and receiving the perks, right? That are this part of like being, that you are being complicit in a way. So it's performative also when you're only talking about one aspect of it, how you don't want to you know like contribute to the war, but also at the same time you being there and you like benefiting from that kind of environment. Like I want to say that being in New York, for example, was really, really good for me personally, right? And professionally. So there's this like tandem that I'm still trying to contend with, how to write in a way that you're both acknowledging your own positionality as a benefactor of war, and as somebody who's, of course, has this compulsion to like also write against it and write against the empire.
And that's not being tolerated anymore, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately.
So I wanted to move on to my next question, and it basically stems from the fact that nowadays we see the kind of impunity that we see. It's not just overt; it's insidious, and it's bolstered by some of the democratic and political pillars, such as the media war machine, including legacy and traditional media, new media, and the different tools these stakeholders holders apply, like big tech and AI, and the algorithms, state-sponsored algorithms. So, how do we, as writers and journalists and activists and poets, navigate in such a climb? I'll start with Sabine, and then Javeria, and then Hanif.
Oh, I was hoping you would start with Hanif and he would give us some pearls of wisdom to follow on.
That's why I deliberately did that.
Um, I mean, I feel like we are being ruled by these tech giants. The empire is now the tech empire. You know, I just feel that there was a point when there was a lot of optimism that technology was going to create a very democratic environment where everybody would have a voice, where everybody would have a platform. There would be, free speech. And I think we now live in a time where the people who be, the powers that be, have realized that controlling these platforms is necessary to curb that free speech or that freedom of thought or that free critique. And I think it's very complicated because we are, as Javeria said, we're all complicit in that oppression as well. I mean, Trump's inauguration, we saw who was there. All the, tech giants were there. They're all, hand in hand. Media is being controlled. Social media is being controlled. We hear the bizarre stories about, TikTok being banned because it's Chinese. We know it's not Chinese, only the parent company is. And so, I mean, we live in such a world where, facts become fiction, fiction becomes fact, truth is being controlled. So really, I don't feel very hopeful. I feel that we are all self-censoring ourselves. We are being very careful because we've now entered a phase where at least those of us who come from countries which have a dictatorial past, where we were afraid of the government, of the state, we were afraid of saying our truths, and looked up to the West to think that this is the home of the free speech, of democracy. And now we have the United States, where free speech is openly being curbed. Trans rights, gender activism, everything is taking a step back. If you saw what happened in UK, it's gone back 20 years in terms of gender rights, trans rights, abortion rights. In the US, free speech, students in liberal universities not being allowed to say what they want, not being able to show their political support, ideologies being banned. So I think it's a very, very dark time. And I don't think that, AI has been, or social media has been that platform that we had hoped for.
Javeria?
Yeah, I was having a chat with a colleague a while ago and was talking about, the kind of these have always been like social media and everything has always been state tools, but not like explicitly enough for like, that you're being severe. Like so many of my friends have now had to deactivate or delete their social media accounts for the fear of being deported, which is very, very like a very material thing, right? And so I'm also thinking about these tools that are becoming state tools. AI is becoming state tool. But at the same time, I also know that there are these poets and writers who are constantly also engaging with these tools in order for, and I always go back to that example of, I was reading this article where it was talking about how the left has no religion and kind of, this religion as a tool that the right has taken claim to when it is left on its own. And so I also fear that with like AI and social media, how it can also be a tool that like the right or for certain group or certain faction can stake a claim to if left unattended and if left unbalanced. And this and then the truly, truly, like you said, Sabine, truly dark times. And so this course that I'm teaching these days at Habib, it's called What is Modernity? And we're talking about how, like we talk from ecology to economy to the modern colonial apartheid state. And one of our the professor Namanak, we really said like I used to say to the West that your future is Pakistan, but actually all of our futures is Palestine. All of our futures is Palestine. If these things are going in the way that they are going, then that's kind of this freedom zone that they keep referring to Gaza as is going to become like all cities really.
Hanif? You're on the mute, Hanif.
Sorry, I was saying that everything that I wanted to say has already been said, and I think Javeria is right. The aspiration now is, it's not just to kind of censor voices that you don't agree with, but wipe them out, and not just wipe them out, then also celebrate it. So I think that's the kind of era that we have entered. Also, like, sort of, we've always had wars. We've always had, like, sort of patches of darkness, as Sabine has sort of mentioned, dark times. But I think now people don't just want wars; they want kind of, sort of genocides. They're not just happy for all our life. We've been hearing about women and children. Lots of these names, wars have been waged in their name. But now, there is actually kind of, there's actually these bloodthirsty mainstream voices which are not only justifying these brutalities, they're basically asking for more of them. That why can't India have its own genocide, and why can't Pakistan do exactly what Israel is doing? And I think your question probably was that what should writers do in these circumstances? Yeah, I think that was part of your question.
Yeah.
I wish I had an answer to that. They should retrain as plumbers or something. Give up. I mean, I think that's it's too late for me now. But I kind of usually tell, like, younger writers that do something else, and then you kind of console yourself by the fact that till the time you're alive and you have a pen and paper and you have your little corner, so count that as a blessing, and do whatever you want to do with it. That little corner of freedom that you've carved for yourself. Do something with it.
Yeah, a few things come to my mind. Like you said, it's not just about war, where people are salivating when it comes to genocide. Reminds me of, and I think not a lot of it, but writing or reading or watching movie series like Game of Thrones or reading that book. Uh, People have an appetite for this. The way Game of Thrones is, the series. It is all gore, and I personally like it as well. So that's one thing. Writers and filmmakers are increase. I don't know if they are increasing that appetite, but
I sort of I don't. I mean, you can say whatever you have to say, but I think the books without murder or incest or sex would be like very boring. So I don't think, like, those books, those stories have always existed, I don't know. That'll be that people watch violent movies or violent cartoons, and they turn out to be mass shooters.
Of course,
humans have always had an appetite for these kind of entertainment, and I don't know. I haven't studied this much, but I think that's. I hope that's not true. People kind of read a
I hope
violent
so
book
as
and then
well.
they go and want to start a genocide or kind of.
No, not start a genocide, but have like they're decent. What I'm trying to say is, maybe desensitization happens there. Not necessarily, they're in for genocide because that would be,
News is more violent than else.
Exactly. Yeah,
Reporting that
absolutely.
we see
And
on
if you look, absolutely, and if you look at today's, Twitter, Twitter feed, with what has happened in Kashmir, there are people like Suchitra Vijayan, who is actually calling out people who are actually saying that, the Indian government should follow the footsteps of Israel. So that's one point as well. And the other thing I wanted to hesitantly discuss, because I'm going to bring in Trump, hesitantly in the sense I don't want, I may be playing a devil's advocate here, but prior to Elon Musk taking over Twitter, Trump was banned. Now, I'm no fan of Trump, but that's the power of big tech, of actually banning a former president or a president. So, yeah, how do you reflect on that? This power that not just the government, but the big tech holds as well, and how do we navigate that power? We'll go with Javeria first.
Asking me the most difficult questions that I myself don't have answers to. How do
reflecting on it.
No, I'm thinking about like how do we now I think like the big tech is the government or is the state, right? These are, about that project that they've also built a prototype for these like the states that they're calling the network states, right? They're trying to make like Silicon Valley the entire world, and they're trying to make like enclosures like Silicon Valley, and everything is gonna look the same, and everything's gonna like we're basically gonna rule over the world, right? So how is that like? You can't now divorce, I think, the state or the government from the big tech, right? From this technological surveillance kind of. But writing, now like I myself am like these social media tools that I once used, to like reach my audience and like post my little poems, and like they've not remained what the hope was. And so I've been thinking about like different modes of alternative modes for writing and mobilizing and community building that are outside of these spaces that may be an alternative to what you're asking. But it's also true that, these things like AI, if you're not using them, you can also not be ignorant to the fact that so for example, in my case, all of my students are using it, and I can't like turn a blind, yes, I can like give them a 0 or on submission or whatever, but I can't turn away from the fact that it's now here and it's not going to go away anytime soon. So how do we keep engaging with these tools as well as resisting them, which I feel like has been a question for writing almost its entire life, whether it's been big tech or AI or the state or any other thing that has previously been a problem. I think that's my yeah.
So moving on, Hanif, I'll begin with you. Uh, Specifically because I wanted to talk about journalism and media. And when you see the media in recent times, the coverage has been, the media has played an incendiary role, drilling a set narrative into the minds of the public, maybe indoctrinating us. So, a lot of experts say that, it's the powers that be that have performed a masterclass when it comes to manipulating the media. But personally, for me, I feel, they're collaborators, and they need not to manipulate. They execute in agreement. We see that in Pakistan as well, especially when you talk about Balochistan. You see media messaging in the West. So what is your opinion? You're on the mute.
I don't think much has changed there. Part of media, especially international, so-called international media or Western media, it has always been kind of essentially very, very racist and white supremacist. And it has always been cheerleading kind of wars. It has always been telling us how to tell our stories. And for a long time, I think there was this facade, and I think some of us somebody talked about complicity before. So I think some of us who kind of had a had a seat on the table or were kind of sort of working with these people, so we might have had some kind of notions about their role, or some kind of sort of some dim hope that there is something called objectivity, or there's something called humanitarianism, or there's something called sort of a set of values. But in the end, kind of I think a lot of us knew it already, but were reluctant to admit that this is like very deeply ingrained kind of sort of white, essentially sort of level of privilege, not just in how news is reported or how it's curated, but also what it is and what it should be. And we can, sort of, we'll change the rules like tomorrow if it suits us. So I think some of us have always known this, but but as it's been mentioned, because of so the speed of things, everything has become a bit more hyper now.
True, true.
And there's no pretense. And for a long time, we've had this pretense
Exactly.
of kind of, sort of neutralities. And now, no, you can go and hug your genocider in chief, and that's completely kosher and fine. And that's all in the family.
I think that's the thing about what is happening right now. Everything is happening with impunity, because it can happen. Before, even though we were, because of the technological advancements, we see it, in real time. But, this has been unprecedented, and that's because of the impunity that we see. So moving on, Sabine, I wanted to ask, if swords do wreak a havoc, it is annihilating when the so-called pillars of democracy and free speech, collude with the establishment. In such a climb, what tactics and techniques work as we write and advocate and participate in different forms of subversion?
I think it's a really interesting conversation, because we are living in these, I mean, we've always lived under surveillance, whether it's dictatorship, whether it's a sort of a empire, overseeing different implicit and explicit ways of surveillance. And now, as everybody mentioned, the loyalties have shifted. These tech oligarchs are now supporting the state and its surveillance, its curating of, what citizens should think. So I think, I personally feel I'm a very stupidly optimistic person. I always try to, see what good can come out of something, even though it is a very dark time. But I think a lot of us grew up at a time or inherited a time where we had a big vision. We wanted to save the world, and we actually believed that we could make a difference. And I think this is a time for introspection, for thinking small. And I don't mean that in a condescending way. I mean it in a positive way. I think our vision has to be smaller. There is so much surveillance. There is so much self-censorship at the moment. There is so much. I think what we could do is, as cliched as it sounds, is really turn inwards. And what I'm trying to do in my classroom, because I am aware that, I may, present a very idealistic vision, but we live in a time where students have to bear the brunt of that vision. There is a domino effect. So I think what I'm trying to do is really focus more on how my students can become a better version of themselves by working on themselves and not going out there to just save the world. Of course, they should be thinking about these things. They should be trying to do what they can, but I think they can start with themselves, really focusing on, and I know, again, it sounds very cliched, but focusing on things like being truthful, being kind, checking their privilege, being aware, just thinking about different sorts of equality, such as ability, disability, those kind of power and privileges questions. So I think for me as a teacher, I have really made my syllabus much smaller than it used to be. The vision of the syllabus is much more smaller. It's become much more reflective. So that's what I'm trying to do as a professor. As a writer, I feel that I'm trying to work a lot with the body and not just with words. Because again, I think back to the 80s, I think back to the times where writers in Pakistan were using metaphor, were trying to find other ways in the 60s, 70s, and 80s to write poetry, to write TV dramas, which were speaking about bigger themes, but through metaphors and through symbolism, right? So if we look at Fez's poetry about Bangladesh, right? You would think it's a love poem, but he's using a lot of metaphor, he's using a lot of symbolism. So what I'm trying to do as a writer is to use the body to tell stories. And that's my personal way of fighting the censorship, fighting the surveillance. So I'm trying to be creative in more innovative ways. And I think this is a time which calls for us writers, thinkers, or, so to say, change makers, to think a little bit out of the box. We are living in unconventional times because of tech, because of AI. So yeah, maybe just thinking about, what does it mean to be creative? What does it mean to speak up? And what does it mean to be silenced? And how can we push against that in other ways than just the pen?
True, true. I'll start with Mohammad, Hanif, with you first. And my question is, a few months ago, I saw this interview between Jon Stewart and Ta-Nehisi Coates, where Jon Stewart said that, maybe in order for a society to progress, it needs to have exploitation. How would you reflect on that?
I mean, that's a too big a question. I wouldn't know where to begin. And yes, it has always existed, and there's always been resistance to that. And whatever tech tools you might have, that is not going to change. That has not changed, and hopefully that will not change.
Sabine?
Yeah, I think we can just again start at a very local level. I mean, there are so many artists in our countries which take these poems or these things. I was just reading about it recently, and they make art out of it. And the poor scribe whose words it is, or the actual artist, the place where it originated, the profit never trickles down. So I think, we spend a lot of time critiquing big structures. But I would just advocate start with yourself, see what is within your control. And slowly it has that effect that it does make a difference at a more meta level.
Javeria?
Honestly, I kind of see that kind of fragility of the collusion, disruption of the empire. So many of my friends have also like coming back to Pakistan. So like I'm thinking of it more as an opportunity now. We grew up thinking like this is what the future is going to be look like. I'm going to be in New York, or I'm going to be in California. I'm going to do this. I'm going to study and PhD, do a PhD. And this is literally what our future is. So then that kind of future is on a hold or like disrupted, right? That kind of future cannot exist anymore. One is forced to think of alternative futures. And so I think along with, my friends and my students, I'm also thinking of those alternative futures now. What would it look like if all of us just stay here and build a collective and like read poems with each other every fortnight? Um, and so like I think echoing both what Hanif sir and what Sabine said, start small and start local and like take it from there.
Um, my last question to all of you is, we talk about accountability and holding, the powers that be accountable. Uh, can we do that in, the climate that we're living in? Does accountability really mean anything now? Or am I just being too pessimistic? We'll go with Hanif.
Yeah, I think that hasn't changed. I think a writer like you're basically accountable to the story that you're trying to tell, and that I don't think anything can change that. That accountability will always be be there, and I think the rest of the responsibilities they come later.
Sabine?
For me, I think it has to start with ourselves, accountability. I mean, I see so many people, they'll sit in their drawing room, criticize America, then go there and have a baby. So
True.
I really think that,
True.
again, we have to start with ourselves. We have to now really start, putting our, um, doing what we actually advocate, practicing what we preach, and holding these, the empire accountable. Yeah, I think let's leave that to karma.
Yeah, I think like consequences or results come in later, right? One is always like what we can do is just hold ourselves accountable and like the empire accountable. And consequences and results, those are maybe like years from now. Those are a later thing.
We see an orange frog after 20 years, somebody comes back.
It's just like it's a cyclical, right? It's always going to come back. Yeah.